So welcome everyone to our fourth HVAC Heat Pump Action Group meeting. And I want to introduce Connie Newber. She is our member and marketing manager. So you will hear her coordinating and speaking up. And I'm sure many of you already work with her as members of the EBC. If you haven't joined the EBC and you're in the meeting, want to talk to you about your membership and the things that you can plug into that we provide for our members. And as a reminder, the EBC, we are here for you, our members. We are a trade association, and what we work on is directed by our membership, and the things that you see that need to be advocated for or worked on or dug into. That's what we do for you as members. So with that, this is our fourth meeting, and this is the meeting that we have with the distributors, manufacturers, and industry stakeholders. And then we do have a meeting that is more formally kicking off, just as a reminder, on the 17th of this month at 3 o'clock. And we'll talk more about that later for the dealers and the contractor dealer network that you guys have. I think we're keeping that meeting separate because there's different issues for your dealers, your heat pump HVAC dealers, to help them with tools and resources and what they need to accelerate their sales and the support that they need from your distributor and manufacturer, the supply chain. So with that, let's take a look at the agenda. I'm going to share my screen here. So as a reminder, we, in all of our meetings, follow antitrust law, and that means that there's no collusion in terms of pricing or markets. And we want to make sure we stick to that strictly in all of our meetings. And also want to just do a shout out that for the heat pump action groups, that we are looking for co-chairs to help be a lead on the groups representing all of us. So I wanted to, if you have an interest, just go ahead and contact me directly, separately would be great. And as I mentioned earlier, before we start the meeting, that the basis for a lot of the strategies, and especially mobilizing the supply chain in Colorado for heat pumps, come from a myriad of research from Colorado Energy Office and Beneficial Electrification League, and work that EBC has collaborated on, that all of our organizations are aligned in believing the distributors as are the key to mobilizing the supply chain for heat pumps in Colorado. And they are the key contact for the contractor, dealers, in terms of they get their product, their pricing and training, and really rely on them. And there's a focus on mobilizing through that touch point in the supply chain in Colorado. So to kick off, we have 3 topics today. This is meant to be a working meeting versus presenting a lot of that type of information today. And the first project that we're going to take a look at is the regulatory policy work that's coming here in 2022. This is a big year. Lots of decisions are being made that will impact HVAC and heat pump acceleration in Colorado. And so we'll talk about that. What are the key issues that we want to advocate for? We're excited that we've started a great informal, and we've had a great relationship with Excel in terms of informally working on a lot of these issues before they go into filings, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Then we're going to, just as a reminder, next steps in terms with manufacturers, working with distributors and engaging the dealers. That next meeting is February 17th, which is more of a kickoff meeting to invite the dealer contractors to. And then today, the big lift is to get a great start on the hockey stick forecast, which is identifying a framework. And we've started some criteria discussion in the last meeting on what will it take to actually meet the 2030 goals that have been set by all the influencers and circles of influence in the marketplace, from the utilities to the cities to the stakeholders. So with that, And then we'll close with setting the next meeting date and any other questions at the end. So this is meant to be a very informal, open discussion where we're all collaborating. I really would love for us all to be in the same room because I feel like it creates a different environment, and we will work on Zoom and hopefully talk about when we feel like we could meet in person. And we'd probably have to have a hybrid meeting to do that. I'm not able to forward here. There we go. All right. So this year is a big lift, like we were saying. The 4 areas that are happening this year is influencing Xcel Energy's 2022 strategic issues filing. That's every 5 years. That is a settlement process that takes place to agree with all the stakeholders and develop the goals for the next 5 years that'll stay in place. It includes the floor for what the total spend is on the DSM rebate programs as well. There's 3 big components. The new kid to the party is beneficial electrification, and that will include the support and the rebates that are necessary to help Xcel get to their goals that are set for a more electrified and carbon-free grid by 2030. And I think, Anne, you're on the call if you want to say a little more about that. When I go through these 4 sections, that would be great. As well as the electric DSM rebate goals and the gas DSM rebate goals. So there's a lot happening and a lot of changes in philosophical and as well as paradigm shifts that are happening and happening quickly this year. Out of those decision rulings, those rulemakings, then those will inform the next full 2023-24 rebate DSM program plan. And my understanding right now is that they're going to extend the current plan into 2023, and the filing for the 2023-24 plan will be more like just legal things that need to be done, 30-day, 60-day notices that need to be covered. And then once the strategic issues are finished, then that full DSM plan for 2023-24 will be developed in the following year. From there, what the EBC has relationships with the other utilities in the state that are not regulated by the PUC. And we've had some of those utilities ask that the EBC share our proposals after we go through the settlement processes and they're finalized, and that they can implement them, much more quickly and take a look at them and say, this is something that'll help our contractors and manufacturers and distributors develop the market and to deliver the rebates in the marketplace more easily. They're interested in hearing about those and seeing if there are things that would make sense for their utility. Then it already has started. We're into the legislative session, and EBC had not necessarily planned in testifying and bringing informing the bills as we normally have, but had a great conversation with Sweep today, and we might be at least doing some testifying and bringing some of that to the table collectively. And so we're looking for a little bit of funding to perhaps participate in that, because the strategic issues and the DSM settlement process, the filings are typically start in, I think, March, but they're going to start July 1st. And since we're in the legislative process, we're going to look into participating a little more than we had planned if we can get funding. So are there any questions about that before we dive into the topics that you guys feel are critical that need to be thought about or included or taken to the table to advocate for in any of those processes? And this is the time, you guys, this is where we need you to tell us what is important. I listed 2 down below in terms of heat pumps, and I think the ER, the ER ratio is what is a hot topic. It's also prohibiting some of the heat pump equipment to be installed or sold in rebates used for them, and the refrigerants, and that's especially R32 that has come up. So that's all the feedback we've gotten so far. And this group rolls up into our policy action committee, which is where we take all those things to the table to figure out how to support them.
Well, I got a suggestion that nobody's going to like but me, which is we already agreed that rebates don't move the needle in single family. So I think we should just dedicate all of the rebate funding to multifamily.
We will take that and hear that into consideration. So Rob, I'm going to write that down. But are you saying that actually multifamily does need more rebates?
Yes, and the reason is quite simple, right? Is that unlike single family, where you don't have the split incentive, and in single family, somebody who puts in a heat pump is going to benefit economically from it. In multifamily, the person who's making the decision about installing that equipment is not going to benefit from the energy savings. So because of that split incentive, we need a lot more incentives to move multifamily owners to adopt bulk beneficial electrification.
Okay. Great. Are there other members that in the EBC that your counterparts that would want to talk about that further? That you know of by chance?
Steve Morgan has his hand raised. He needs to unmute himself.
Ah.
Yeah, hi, I have a potential topic of interest that I might also be the only one passionate about, which is seeing more policy or push for dual fuel systems that are partial heat pump, partial fuel based. And I say that from the perspective of engineer in the field and the understanding of grid carbon emissionality. It's very much a transitionary topic. It's not something that I think has long-term 30+ year support, but the reality is until our grid is truly clean and electrified, our grid is electrified by definition, until our grid is truly carbon free, the reality is that fossil-based fuels do have a role to play and can be more carbon efficient during certain periods of the year. And I think it's a little presumptive to assume that electric inherently means the most carbon efficient, because the data just suggests otherwise. And I think there needs to be some advocacy for dual fuel systems until we get to a truly carbon-free grid.
I so agree with that, and I agree with it for another reason, which is that if we want heat pump adoption, the very best path we're going to get it is dual fuel. That's the one that's going to make homeowners the most comfortable in adopting heat pumps as their primary heat source, is having that comfort level that they've got redundancy in their home heating. So yeah, I think dual fuel is a key component to heat pump adoption.
If you're looking for a third, I'll third that.
It also makes the cost more of an incremental adoption if you're putting in a heat pump with an existing furnace system. Whereas down the line, when that furnace fails, you can replace it with a air handler that's compatible with the heat pump. So it kind of splits up that upfront capital cost of replacing your whole system.
Awesome. So I am not able to see everybody's names here that just spoke up. Could you let me know everybody that just spoke?
That was Denise Grimm and Steve Morgan.
Oh, actually, I think that might have been Alexandra. I haven't spoken
Oh.
yet. This is Denise.
Yes, sorry, that was Alexandra.
That's Alexandra. Okay, thanks.
But I was going to speak. I was just waiting my turn.
Go ahead.
I was going to certainly agree with actually everyone so far, and I would be happy to participate in discussions. You know, I work primarily with commercial and multifamily properties, and on the rebate side of things, and also certainly worked on trying to evaluate the feasibility for both all electric and dual fuel. And so, yeah, whatever I can do to participate in those discussions, I'm happy to, from working directly with people that on the owner's side, owner's rep side of things.
Great. And just in general, everybody, would everybody be in concurrence about the dual fuel transition side? Anybody kind of opposed to that for any reason?
I'm not opposed to it so much as I think that really another big issue is just homeowner education. Most homeowners don't understand it at all.
Right.
And I actually have one other question from the first statement. When you were talking about multifamily, were you specifically referring to rental properties?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. Great.
Patricia, this is Bill with Helio Home.
Yeah, hi, Bill.
Hey, I'm not opposed to putting more incentives and rebates on the multifamily side, nor am I opposed to the hybrid approach. But I'll tell you that most of our clients are motivated by the residential rebates, and we're doing all electric heat pumps, taking out the old systems economically, putting on solar. So it kind of addresses the question of where the fuel is coming from and the carbon. So, you know, from what we're doing, we're an electrification company, and I don't really want to use any more gas, especially if I can put the solar on their roof and reduce their carbon footprint. So it's all good. We're all paddling in the same direction, but I'm not installing any more gas, and we won't ever.
I should probably just jump in to say that my comment really comes from my perspective working in the commercial sector, where the ability to throw solar panels on available roof space just isn't to offset the increased electric consumption, just isn't really an option in many cases. So yeah, my comments are really stemming from my experience working in the commercial sector. I realize residential is very different, and that it is an all of the above approach, but I just wanted to make sure that the hybrid approach isn't left out where it is more applicable in the appropriate building type scenario.
Well, and I do like the comment about it's all paddling in the right direction. And I think that it sounds like there's a place for both, and it depends on the model of the company, and you know what you're able to do with what your model is and your type of client. So I think that there's in the support of the utilities, it sounds like they are leaning towards dual fuel and starting to elevate that a little bit more. And this will be a pretty hot topic, I'm expecting, in strategic issues and the new, you know, rebate updates to the plan. Anything? Yeah.
Matt Baker here with Daikin. And I just wanted to weigh in that while Daikin certainly envisions the future of all electric heat pump heating, space conditioning, we recognize dual fuel as a really important transition model, both for the peace of mind for contractors and dealers, for those who live in extreme climates where cold climate heat pumps are still progressing to a point where they can handle that. So I just wanted to weigh in and share that perspective for that we are behind this as well.
Great.
Yeah,
Any other? Yeah, go ahead.
Patricia, this is Sean. from Mitsubishi. And I'll second these comments around and underline the point that it's a transition strategy. The equipment is getting there. It can be done. I got a picture of someone sending me a picture of their system operating in -22 this morning in Salida. So
Nice.
the systems do the job, but the points are well taken around transition, around adoption, around encouraging market movement, et cetera. And I think it needs to be really clear that it is, I wholeheartedly support a dual fuel approach when looking at replacing an air conditioning unit with an existing or viable furnace, for example. I think air conditioning outdoor units can be pretty easily upgraded to a heat pump model, and just with maybe some exceptions, stopping air conditioning being a thing and heat pumps now being the next thing, with various backup systems appropriate to the application. That said, rowing in the right direction, and avoiding putting equipment into market that has a 20-year lifespan when we have to grapple with multiple billions of gigatons of climate change, carbon neutral, whatever terminology you want to put on it. We have a very big budget to deal with, and spending more when we have to get our hands around that budget is not a good idea. When I say spending more carbon when we have a small carbon budget to deal with is a major concern.
Got it. No, that's great. It sounds like we're all pretty in alignment on that, and that's what we wanted to. Yep.
One of the things that I would say with that, though, is that in order to call it encourage the use of the heat pump when it is capable of meeting the heat demand, similar to like what Title 24 has done in California, I think that there would need to be more to it than just simply saying dual fuel. I think it would tie into changeover temperatures and things that would need to have some type of a limitation to allow the maximum use of the heat pump, and only allowing the furnace to come on when it's unable to maintain the desired comfort level for the end user.
So are you saying, to make sure I heard that correctly, that it's when making those choices at the time of install, that be a criteria for when do you go to dual fuel and at what point and what temperature in your settings?
Yeah, but I think it needs to be either in the regulations or in the rebates or something else that would restrict the use of the furnace to only the supplemental heat when the heat pump is not able to fully meet the heating demand. And so that would encourage the maximized use of the heat pump, and then only allow the gas furnace to be coming on when the heat pump's unable to maintain the desired heating conditions. And so I think that would be a big part of that. Another one of the things to potentially look for during that is that typically inverter-driven heat pumps are going to function better at the lower temperatures. And so that potentially would encourage the longer or to the colder condition uses of the heat pump before turning over to the gas furnace. So that is maybe another thing to be considering in the rules and regulations around the dual fuel and what may be done from rebates and incentives.
Got it.
So maybe terminology to add to that, Patricia, would just be focusing on or including control solutions, appropriate control solutions.
Okay. And our goal is to have input into these processes prior to the plans being released, and getting into strategic list issues versus waiting till the plans are put out and then we go into the legal process to make changes. That's one of our goals this year. So that's why I think upfront understanding where we all agree and where we all want to work together to advocate for is the role that we play here. So that's great feedback. Any other things before we move forward?
I have just one thing that's been, it's just part of the barriers conversation, and it's thinking about financial burden and unintended consequences through some of the things we want to accomplish, to mitigate or to achieve our climate goals or mitigate, the impacts of climate change. And working with businesses every day, this is the number one factor. And I agree, in some cases, incentives right now aren't enough to flip that project like we'd like it to. But also, in the case of property managers, property owners that have multiple tenants, they pass on that financial burden to the tenant, and people are getting priced out of some markets, this is changing the face of the landscape, in my opinion, of, or potentially could change it in terms of, who can afford to stay in those buildings anymore for the property owners that have, proactively, like we would like them to do, make those upgrades. So I don't know where that fits in here exactly, if it fits in at all, but just wanted to bring it up. Maybe it just still falls in the rebates and incentives bucket.
I don't know, we'd have to, and who made those comments? I'm recognizing your voice now, but.
I apologize, I should introduce myself. It's Denise with PACE, Partners for Clean Environment.
Got it. All right. Great. With that, oh, yep.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I've got one other thing I'm just kind of thinking about too, and it kind of came back to the homeowner education. I wonder if there's an opportunity with some of the either Excel or some of the other utilities to have success stories from a standpoint. Like somebody had just mentioned that they got word from somebody that their heat pump was working well and it was 22 below zero. If there's the ability and the desire to be able to find success stories, that therefore that can be related to the homeowners, then it becomes an easier sell that a heat pump is going to be able to meet the heating demands that they're going to be running into. And so I think that could definitely still be part of that homeowner education, and then the utilities working either with manufacturers or the utilities based on their own known, maybe they've got some studies and things that they've done, but I think that could be a big part of helping move the needle on the heat pump adoption in Colorado.
No, and that actually plays into why we're going to work on the forecasting here in a little bit, because I think the goal is for us to figure out what the industry believes needs to happen in the amount of installs that take place by 2030 to hit the goals. And I think it'll help identify how much homeowner education is going to be needed. That would be part of our recommendation that would come out of that forecasting exercise. And I think what you're talking about plays into, case studies that funnel down to the contractor to talk with the homeowners about, as well as, directly to the consumers from the utilities too. I think there's a lot of different places to take those kind of case study stories that can create some awareness that isn't there yet.
Patricia,
Great.
this is Sean again. Real quick, you and I have chatted offline about workforce development. You know, where are the people coming from? Where are they getting trained? Where are they going to? And getting, you know, I don't know if that belongs in these topics or not, but I'll just mention it as a reminder. Also, there are equipment options internationally that are not available in the United States. And when I have asked for some of this equipment to be brought into the United States, it always falls back to business case, whether or not they have the manufacturing capability, whether or not they can get through the, you know, the pricing, the market development, et cetera. It's not an easy thing to bring new equipment into the United States that's abroad. That said, CO2 and, you know, low global warming potential refrigerants are key items that are going to be coming to the top of the conversation here in the next couple of years, as 410A is being phased out and 32 and other refrigerants being phased in. And so the ask is, if we as a group could you know, effectively sign on to a bipartisan or multi-partisan letter of request, if you will, that can be then sent off to the different manufacturers and say, hey, this is a group of folks, professionals, building professionals, HVAC professionals that are in Colorado that are asking for these things. And we need to tell you right now, manufacturers, that there's a market here in Colorado, that there's a market, that this in our market overlaps with other markets such as you know, Utah and Chicago, et cetera.
That's a great idea. Okay. Just making a note.
Patricia, just to circle back to that, that economic consequences of adopting heat pumps, you know, one of the answers to that is dual fuel. And the reason for that is that the fuel costs going forward are going to change, right? And so dual fuel is one thing that gives you some sort of economic certainty or comfort that this decision you're making now to replace equipment that you're going to have for the next 20 years, you have the ability to choose the least expensive fuel in 5 or 10 or 20 years as things change, so that you're giving the client the comfort level that they're always going to be able to pick the least expensive fuel, which right now might be natural gas, and in 5 years might no longer be natural gas. So that's kind of one of the arguments for dual fuel, is it gives you that comfort level that regardless of what happens to fuel costs, you have the flexibility of choosing the least expensive fuel.
Got it. Great. So I'm going to close that topic up and go to the next one, which is the EAR, the energy efficiency ratio. And in the last DSM plan, Eebc, or let's see, Trane, Mitsubishi, and Daikin put together their business cases for ideas how to change how the EAR ratings right now and how they are incorporated into the rebates. And Excel did, you know, we had the meeting, we talked through it. They had asked for manufacturers for you guys to continue to grab information and case studies to help inform them on making any changes to that. And as I remember it, the biggest concern was that there are 5 major peaks in the year, and that they felt like they could not change the EAR because at those peaks, they need it for reliability, you know, to deliver energy. So, but there were some good examples in other states as well. So my point is that right now I'm re-forwarding that to the managers in that area. And I think we should put together as much as we can. I know that you guys, the different manufacturers and companies, have done research and have different approaches and solutions and data. And we need some data analytics and other ideas, I think, to go into conversation instead of waiting until we end up into the actual new plan process, because that won't be until next year. I think that we'll get to dive into that. I don't know if that'll come up in strategic issues, probably not. So any comments at this point, or if you want to take that offline with me and send you any ideas or any data that would be helpful to Excel to evaluate, how they can guarantee the delivery and change the EAR so that your heat pump equipment is eligible for rebates. If I have is a better way to summarize that, please add to that. That's how I understood that at this point. Does everybody just say, yes, we agree, and we will pull stuff together, and I can resend out to the manufacturers what you guys submitted 2 years ago? If that would be helpful to jog everybody's memory of what we turned in.
That'd be helpful.
Okay.
Yes, EAR is a problem, and yes, we would like to look at it.
Okay. This is the biggie. I think, to me, this is seems to be the number one thing that we want to advocate for, and is a game changer for you guys in the marketplace. So if that's not true, let me know now. But if you agree, then I think, we need to start working on that now.
Yeah, Charlie here. I think it's a big issue. We got to be a little careful, because EER is, although the name rating is the same, products are not rated the same. So taking two different products from different areas, comparing their EERs doesn't mean they're operating at the same efficiency. The way that they're tested isn't always the same.
And that seems to be kind of the crux in the problem. And maybe it just needs to be
categorized.
Yeah, in a different way than how it is now. And that might fix it. Maybe it's not changing the year, but it's looking at the category, how it's categorized in performance. This is beyond my technical understanding. So this is where we rely on you guys to develop what that could be that would work for all of you guys and move the needle for you.
Yeah, and there will be a change in SEER and HSPF, shifting from kind of a first generation SEER to a second generation, literally called SEER 2. So that's going to be coming around. Technically, it's out now, and it will be showing up in more and more places. So I think it's a valid conversation, but it will likely have to dovetail with that.
And the more holistically it sounds like we can talk about that, the more value that will be to Excel.
Are you talking about EER ratings for ground source heat pumps or air source heat pumps?
Exactly.
Did you say exactly?
Yeah.
Because for water source, ground source heat pumps, we already have a 13256-1 ARI ISO ASHRAE rating, and that covers for water well entering water temperatures, boiler chiller entering water temperatures, and extended range for ground loop operation.
Yeah, definitely. And if you look at the EERs of a ground source heat pump versus an air source heat pump, the ground source is going to be much better. So how do you incentivize for different EER ratings for products that aren't apples to apples?
That's a good point, because air source equipment is rated in SEER, not EAR, seasonal energy efficiency rating.
Right.
And the two are not the same.
I would also quickly add that SEER only even applies to smaller unitary equipment. In commercial, as soon as you get above 5 tons, SEER is just not, it's just an irrelevant rating, and at least in my side of things.
If it's air source, it's relevant
Uh,
because at what load and at what outside air temperature are you doing the rating on?
I'm saying at above 5 tons of rated equipment capacity, we don't even get SEER ratings for equipment from most
Okay.
manufacturers.
Oh, I got
Correct.
you. I got you.
We
Correct.
look at other metrics like IER
Uh-huh.
and IPLV. Actually, that's for chillers, but the rating metrics are just different at larger equipment sizes.
Okay. Because for ground source heat pump, if it's a valid unit that the manufacturer wants to prove their integrity, it will have the AHRI 13256-1 ratings. That means the manufacturer has to pay to have product arbitrarily pulled off the line and tested independently.
Yes, and similar ratings exist for larger commercial equipment. Just those particular metrics change when you get into the larger systems.
Okay.
Should we, so I'm thinking that we need to, because I realize right now there's 20 minutes left and we wanted to forecast today. And so I'm wondering if we need to maybe break these into smaller meetings on these topics, separate meetings on each topic. So we should break it into the ear rating topic. We haven't talked about refrigerants. I am unclear where the opportunity is for influence on refrigerants. And I think this is emerging, and ACA and a lot of organizations are working on this. Are those two things that we should put into a separate hour-long discussion, and everybody, I can send out what we submitted publicly in the last DSM settlement process. And then we can all start working from that point forward. Does that sound like a plan for us to be able to dig into this? I just feel like we don't have time to talk to it. We have to get down to brass tacks on all of these two pieces.
Yeah, sounds good. I would create a meeting for each, and people that have information to contribute can join.
Right. So if this is something that is relevant to you and you're bringing things to the table, then that helps that that's your intervening group. But we want to take this to Excel beforehand and not wait. So it gives them time to consider what they're putting into their plan. So, all right, that sounds good to me. Do we need to touch base on refrigerants real quick? Is there any? Is there a group that I don't know where we would have influence on that at this point? There might be some legislative stuff happening that
there's a lot of legislation. Sorry,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, John.
I was just going to say there's a lot of legislation. Our lower GWP is being mandated nationally, I believe, starting in certain applications in January 1st, 2024. And it's it's part of a well-established phase down plan. It's been a long time coming, lots of conversations nationally, internationally. But to answer the question, yeah, there's a lot of legislation, and I think if EBC was going to do something about it, it probably relates back to just helping professionals locate good sources of training. If they're not able to participate with training provided through their distributors, et cetera, that maybe there's a Colorado specific resource that could be talked about. But I think it's a fairly established pathway.
Is there anything other than making sure that sources for training and that we make sure if we can find access and provide that? Is there anything on the legislative policy side that we need to be involved with, or it would be helpful locally?
I would say, I would say stay away from calling out specific refrigerants. Stay more to GWP levels. Like on the slide here, you say especially R32. There's other refrigerants that are going to be available in the future from multiple manufacturers. And then the training aspect too is most of these refrigerants that are going to replace R410 or 410A are probably going to be slightly flammable. So the training side of it is going to be critical.
Okay. Great. Any other topics that you guys are thinking about in terms of the energy transition and going carbon free and everything that's going on? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to pass along, there is a bill that is slated to be introduced into the Colorado legislation by the end of next week, I believe. Representative Burnett is sponsoring the bill, and that's going to be a bill that is basically making it illegal to prohibit the installation of a low GWP refrigerant after a particular date, and that becomes then the requirement that the individual jurisdictions have to update their building codes to make allowances for the use of low GWP refrigerants. Because Colorado does not have a statewide building code, you would have to go to each individual jurisdiction and the building codes that in those local jurisdictions updated to make the allowances. So that's why, as the industry, we're pursuing legislation in some states because it's easier than trying to go to all of the individual jurisdictions there. So once I know what that bill number is, I will go ahead and pass it along to you. But the latest information I had is that should be submitted to the legislation by the end of next week.
Is that so? If national rules, go into effect and the legislation goes into effect, because we're a home ruled state, it doesn't mean that they'll funnel down to every jurisdiction, the 300 and something that there are in Colorado. Is that what you're saying?
Well, and that's the reason of doing it from a state law. There are several states, Washington, Oregon, Texas, that have passed similar laws to be able to force the local building codes to update their codes, and basically saying that if they do not update the codes by a particular date, that then the building code officials cannot prohibit the use of an alternate refrigerant, low GWP refrigerant that has been SNAP approved, and SNAP through EPA sets usage requirements for new refrigerants, and SNAP Rule 23 has 6 low GWP refrigerants that it has provided allowances for in air conditioning.
Robert, this is.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Robert. This is. Are you talking about the legislation that's more towards making it easier to adopt 2L refrigerants? Slightly flammable refrigerants?
I mean, you've got the national legislation, which is the AIM Act. The legislation that is about to be filed in Colorado, it will be noting that it will force the building codes to be updated to make allowance or prevent them or prohibit them from disallowing the use of a low GWP refrigerant as long as it meets SNAP regulations.
Yeah, but there's nothing, the low GWP side isn't the limiting factor. I think it's the 2L side. I think it's the flammability side.
No, but just one is a subset of the other.
Not necessarily. There's other refrigerants on the market that are non-flammable that are low GWP.
So I'm going to say that we might want to take this one and make a separate meeting for it as well. I'm just concerned, does Colorado Energy Office, are they working with I think it's Tracy Burnett on that?
Not, well, I mean, Representative Burnett is the one that is sponsoring the bill in Colorado. But again, I don't have a bill number, and therefore, since it hasn't been published, I don't have the wording on the bill yet. Once I get that information, I'll be glad to go ahead and send that to you, so you've got that information. But that legislative approach is being addressed in about 9 or 10 states at this point.
And they're probably home ruled states. Is that the?
Most of them, a couple of them they're on such an old edition of the model codes that it would take them way too long to update through their normal process. And so that's the reason of also pursuing it through the legislative approach.
Okay. I'm probably going to check with Colorado Energy Office and a couple others and see if they're working with Representative Burnett on this. I would hope they are, because they are responsible for the jurisdictions and statewide codes. Like have been working on those types of things. So I'll find out that piece too. If you can find out the bill number, that would be fantastic when it gets assigned.
Yep. As soon as it's assigned and submitted, then I'll have that information, and I'm trying to track it to see when that happens.
Okay, fantastic. Just looking at time here, we have 1 minute, you guys. So I'm just going to pop to a couple things. The second project, so I want to reach out to the manufacturers to talk about assigning or setting up meetings with your distributors to target the 7 to 10 heat pump dealers that you wanted to work with to accelerate their sales. And we have a meeting scheduled for February 17th, 3 o'clock is our kickoff meeting. And so we can forward you that invite to forward. So that's something that we can take offline and talk about. And then, you know, the forecasting piece that we talked about, identifying the metrics, the criteria, the desired outcomes based on the 2030 goals that have been established by the utilities and the cities and the stakeholders. And I think that this forecasting is going to be an incredible tool to help to educate the utilities and the cities and the stakeholders that they've created these goals. And I think we're going to have to say, hey, here is the organic amount of heat pump installs that will naturally take place year over year, if it's 1% or whatnot. And then, you know, looking at, okay, how do we ramp up? It's going to be these last 6 to 5 years here. And I think that it's going to take a heavier, this is what I see happening in the marketplace, is that I think hopefully we'll have the ability to influence the cities and the utilities with more consumer awareness, and we can give direction on the things that will help us accelerate the heat pump sales with, you know, your specific downline. So with that, if anybody needs to drop off, we completely understand. We have set a cadence for those meetings, and we'll include that in the notes to you when we send out the links. And then I'm probably just struggling for a moment thinking how we will do these individual meetings. And I'm wondering if we will like stack them in one day or if we'll spread them out. If you want to send any thoughts on that, that would work best for you. If you're going to be involved with a couple of them, please do that. That would be fantastic. Any other comments before we go? Super appreciate the sharing on your thoughts on some of the pieces that we need to be looking at. We will be bringing to you on the advocacy portion with Excel and other utilities and maybe some on the legislation, you know, things that EEBC is working with SWEEP and other organizations on, and bring these to you and get your feedback on what's being proposed, because we always need to bring the business practicality and reality of what really happens in the field to a lot of the proposals that take place. And so that's kind of our next step here. Anything else before we go? If you want to stay to talk for an extra 15 minutes, I'm glad to do that. But any other comments before we go? Is this what you guys are looking for? Is my big question.
Is this meaning all the stuff we talked about, or just in general?
Yeah, does this feel on track, or is there other things that we still need to be talking about? That might be too big of a question.
I think this is fruitful in compiling a list of future discussions. So yes, I would say that it was successful in that regard.
Okay, great. I really want to dig into these and get going on them. I think is identifying them and then prioritizing, set up meetings to dig into them. And I know we need the outcome right to what we're going to present. So
Like
any
you
other?
said, it's a lot better to address things up front with Excel than to try to argue after they've kind of got their thoughts together and their plans for the next DSM plan.
Absolutely. So we're working on getting more proactive on that side versus, and it's expensive, to go into these settlement processes with the legal and literally the budget for strategic issues and for just the DSM process would have been about 140,000. And of course, we're a small organizations. We do not have that. And that's the legal, the testimony, the writing, the testimony, the witnesses, the, things that we support. And then just the coordination alone of our staff time with all of our members that are participating. And we worked out a way that we can use the attorneys in a limited manner just to do the filings and the dates and keeping us all on top of those. And then Howard Geller from SWEEP retired, and he's going to be representing and doing the heavy lifting on that side. So the budget plus the staff time is down to 100,000. So we don't have that for membership. We ask members that are intervening to give additional support funds to cover those hard costs. And I did get some money from the Energy Foundation, and it was a third of what we had asked for. So I'm going to hit the ground hard with fundraising to come up with those additional funds. So if we don't raise them, we're going to have to participate in a more limited manner. And this is such an important year that want to be able to do that. So that's kind of where we are as an organization, just to let you know what we believe you guys are looking for and need to have that voice and that advocacy and be at the table. Any questions before we drop off, or any other comments?
I'm sure we're going to be talking about these numbers and the forecasting and such next time, but just looking at this, the inflection point turn, that's already happened. There's more heat pumps that have been sold in 2020 than there were furnaces. So whether or not that continues is to be determined, but we're basically already at that inflection point. So
yeah, and that's something that I completely agree, because from what I hear, from you guys in the marketplace, it's basically, your heat pump sales doubled in 2020. And then it sounds like the stocking, the forecasting that was done, everybody doubled up in the beginning of the year of 2021, and they were sold out by the summer. And so what does that mean for 2022? And so I think this is what we get to do. We get to adjust, based on what we see in the marketplace, adjust this hockey stick piece and go, okay, so then what else needs to be in that trajectory, right? To that inflection point, how much has naturally happened and how do we accelerate it? And, maybe we're just focusing on that side, which would be fantastic, but I think putting the numbers to it is so critical on getting impact and attention from, all the groups that are driving these goals, because I'm concerned that I hear the number, 200,000 thrown out by some of the groups in just AC replacements by 2030. And from our discussions with you guys, it sounds like that number is just organically going to happen, and there's no stretch in there. And what would it take to get to that 50 to 80% in the next 8 years? So that's kind of the summary of the slide and your comment, Sean. Anything else? That's good to hear. All right, feel free to send me a note on the side and we will send you follow up with some of these key dates and times and the slides and possibly some minutes for you too. Any other comments before we go? I haven't looked at the chat yet.
Thanks for the discussion, Patricia. This was great.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, this is exciting stuff. This is, you know, we're going to be in the thick of it this year. It's going to be fun, but it's going to be a massive lift. So,
hey Patricia, can you look at the chat just for a second?
Yep.
Patricia, before you cut us off, I'm going to post the information in there for Steve. I see Steve's asking about reference information on that. So I'm going to post a couple things in if you can leave it open.
Okay, you bet.
Thanks, Sean.
Great. Also, I will just reference here that Beneficial Electrification League of Colorado, that audience was for distributors and manufacturers only. It does not include stakeholders and others. It's collectively how to support them to you know, support the dealers in the marketplace. And I don't know if I had misspoken on that. And I see heat pump numbers there. And furnace numbers, there's some that we can look at. You know, if you want, is there any other specific things? Does SWEEP advocate for dual fuel? I will get more information on that. I think SWEEP is definitely, I don't want to comment out of place, but I mean, definitely SWEEP is pushing for, you know, the full switch over to a heat pump. I think they're making allowances, but they are pushing the envelope on that. And that might change as they get feedback. Yeah, I don't know. It's called. Great. Anything else? Did I miss anything in the chat for everyone? There is a recap of the bills through the Energy Foundation that we have a link that's tracking all the bills are related to clean energy. It's, you know, much more expansive than just heat pumps. And we'll provide that link. It is meant to be private and held within our membership. It's not to be distributed to others. That's part of our agreement with Energy Foundation. So I can give you a link to that as well